My name is Andrei Kirilenko. I'm a professor of finance and director of the Center for Global Finance and Technology at the Imperial College Business School. I'm also a recovering regulator. Prior to joining Imperial, I was at MIT, and before that I was working for the US regulatory agency called Commodity Futures Trading Commission. What you will see today spans the research that I've done with my colleagues over a period of time, and this research lies in the intersection of finance, technology, and regulation. Why finance, technology, and regulation? On the left-hand side here on this slide, you see what the London Stock Exchange used to look like. It was a large building populated by people. There were people milling around, talking to each other, discussing what they want to buy and sell. It was very human-centric. On the right-hand side, you see what the London Stock Exchange looks like now. It's a bunch of servers in cages in a very cold room with very little human presence. So technology plays a very central role in how markets are organized now. Technologies, unless you understand technology, it's very difficult to understand finance. And finance is also a very regulated area. So it's somewhere between finance, regulation, and technology. There will be, it is the intersection of this talk. I'd like to start out with something that was out there. And it was this idea of automating markets. This talk, as you know, is called Moore's Law versus Murphy's Law. So Moore's Law is the law that states, it's not really a law, it's really an observation that processing power of computer processors increases exponentially, has been increasing exponentially. They're becoming faster and cheaper from the very first point they were invented. Murphy's Law goes like this: if something can go wrong, it will. And with computers being so big and powerful, it will happen very, very fast. So markets started automating, going from humans to machines in about late 70s. And in the beginning, these marketplaces, both in the US and the UK, were actually owned by people who traded there. So it was the first order of business was convincing him to actually relinquish this power. And the way it was done, it was proposed to them to say, look, when you're on the floor trading, the machines will be off. It's only after hours, when you're not present, when the machines are going to be trading, that you can still, there's still orders could be submitted and traded during that time. And the trader said, fine. And within a decade, there were no more floors. Everything was replaced by the machines. Why? Because computers are very good at doing repeated, simple tasks, which is what trading is. It's a collection of repeated, simple tasks. Submit an order, get the reply, agree or disagree, change your order, get a transaction, get it settled, get it cleared, done. Money transferred to accounts. Do it all the time. Computers are good at that, and they're becoming cheaper and cheaper at doing that. Computers also don't need bathroom breaks. They don't need lunch. They don't break up with girlfriends. They don't, get excited on a warm, sunny day. So in terms of what's called operational risk, it could be reduced. And so there was this promise, as markets are becoming more and more automated, maybe it will become cheaper for everyone to buy and sell stocks, for example, or futures or bonds. And indeed, it was observed, a collection of research papers have come out that the costs of transacting in an automated market have come down dramatically. And then on May 6, 2010, came the flash crash. The flash crash was a massive systemic event that occurred in the space of about 30 minutes that affected the entire US financial marketplace. Stocks, bonds, futures, exchange-traded funds, gold, it spilled over across to other markets internationally. It was a massive, massive disruption. And so the questions that came up in the aftermath of the flash crash, what happened? Did something fundamental happen? Did anything happen to the President of the United States? No. Did someone make an important announcement that, something really drastic was about to happen? No. So why this? Why all the markets are going down anywhere between 6 to 9% and bouncing back up with tremendous velocity? At the time, I was at the US regulatory agency, and about 2 years prior to that, to the flash crash, I joined about 18 months prior to the flash crash. And my goal was to start developing a prototype of automated surveillance system for the agency, because the floors have disappeared, and the agency used to have a surveillance system which was based on humans. There were former traders who were walking around the floor with 25 years of experience and observing what other people are doing. And, to all of you, if I say a stock market, you're probably, visualizing to yourself a large floor with a collection of individuals in multicolored jackets, gesticulating, yelling. It's very busy, a lot of visual information there. It's no more like that, but it used to be not that long ago. And to an untrained eye, it looks very busy. It's hard to know what to look for. But to someone who's been in that environment for 20 to 25 years, they know exactly what to look for and what to tune out. Literally, there are people that occupy certain positions and use certain gestures and move in a certain trajectory that they're supposed to move to. If they somehow deviate from that trajectory, then the surveillance specialist would ask him, what did you do? Why did you move this way and not that way? Why were you facing this person and not that person? Because it's very actually prescribed. That was no longer working because there were no more floors. We needed to design a system that would be like that would be eyes and ears, but only in an automated environment. So technological robots, programs, algorithms that would be looking for patterns of how people were trading. So I was working on it for a period of time with a small group of people, and we developed a proof of concept. And then the flash crash happened. And when the flash crash happened, we had certain tools already that we could deploy, and we did. And we had some initial answers of why that happened. Meanwhile, the flash crash was blamed immediately in its aftermath on the so-called high-frequency traders, HFTs. What are high-frequency traders? There are different definitions of what they are, but basically, they're very, very fast trading algorithms that little is known about. And so the popular view was that, look, if nothing fundamental happened, then something must be lurking inside these shiny automated markets. There may be some predators that are machine type of predators that did that to the market itself. Literally, lots and lots of wealth was wiped out and then sort of bounced back. There was a tremendous redistribution of value in the financial marketplace. There was an investigation. I was part of that investigation. We started looking at whether or not high-frequency traders were the ones who were to blame for this tremendous traumatic event. We'll come back to these questions. The outline of this talk, the way I'd like to proceed, is that I'd like to look at how technology interacts with financial markets in a number of ways. One is technology in algorithmic trading. Another is technology in market design. How are these servers actually designed? Are they designed in a robust way, or will we be experiencing this tremendous outburst, air pockets from time to time? Another is technology and regulation. How do you regulate computers? Can you put computers to jail? Can you put them on trial? With humans, you know what to do. If someone is trying to do something disruptive, you drag them off the floor. What do you do with a computer? Do you push a red button somewhere? How do you regulate it? What should be the regulatory principles of regulating computers? The fact of life is, markets are now populated by computers. How do you regulate them? And then, if you're regulating computers, if you're writing regulations for computers, how do you implement these regulations? Because if you write in regulations for computers, they will be translated into lines of code, because computers run on code. Human lawyers write in natural business language, in English, and legalese more like it. How do you translate it? And how much is going to be lost in translation? Maybe there will be an intent for some lawyer to do something wonderful. But how do you know that it's implemented in the actual lines of code? Because there will be a developer at the end of the line, typing things up, and he may not even have any idea what the lawyer wants to do. So these are the interactions between technology, regulation, and finance. So let's proceed. Flash crash. So this is a picture of the ecosystem of market participants. Looks like a flower. What this flower is a collection of overlapping ovals that represent particular trading strategies present in the market based on how much they trade, which is the vertical axis, and how much do they hold at any given time. You can trade very little and accumulate the number of stocks or futures contracts, or you can go in and out, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell all day long. So if you're on the vertical axis on that yellow oval, around zero, centered on zero, then you're trading a lot and not really taking any position in terms of size. If you're going to the left, you're taking a position of size in the short direction, meaning you're selling to the market. On the right, you're buying something in the market. And if you're in the middle, where there's a collection of overlapping ovals, you're sort of a combination of these strategies. This is a visual way of representing what about 35,000 different participants do on any given day. These are all algorithms. So in this market, it's called the mini S&P 500 futures contract market. It's a very kind of nerdy name. But E stands for electronic only. Mini stands for the size of the contract. S&P 500 stands for the all 500 US stocks, largest stocks, right? And futures means that it's not a stock, but it's a contract on which you can go place bets on the direction of the futures market. So this is the ecosystem. It's quite a complex ecosystem. It's overlapping, as you can see. High-frequency traders do stand out from the rest of the crowd. They do something. They participate in about, I would tell you, of those 35,000 market participants, about 12 account for 50% of all trading activity, 12. Incredible. When I first saw that, I, of course, naturally looked at who they are. And I didn't recognize any of the names. They're not banks. They're not names that you would read somewhere. And then I said, well, are these regulated entities? Does someone regulate them? Do US federal regulators regulate them? No. They trade their own money. They don't touch any. When you get regulated in financial markets, if you touch anybody else's money or give somebody advice, because you can misappropriate the money or give the wrong advice. If it's your money and it's your own strategy and you're not touching anybody else's money or giving anybody else's advice, you can come into this market, set up shop, and start trading. Financial markets are regulated very differently from banks. Banks need to get a license from the regulators to operate. In financial markets, market participants don't really need to apply for a license. They could just set up an account with a broker and start trading. So I said, well, let's look a little bit deeper. Let's see, maybe we could find out a little bit more about them, their names. Let's go see if they have websites. Go look at their websites. It's one homepage that says, we hire PhDs in physics and math, sends you CVs through this window. You don't even know where they're located. Like, where are they? 50% of trading volume in the incredibly systemic market. Who are these algorithms, and what is it that they do? They're incredibly, incredibly important. That was, however, one question. Another question was, of course, did they cause the flash crash? So my colleagues and I analyzed the pattern of how they traded on the day of the flash crash, and we found that they didn't change their trading pattern. They're always bounce in and out, in and out, in and out, go buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell, and they don't accumulate a position of size. So they didn't cause the flash crash. There was a fundamental trader who came in, an algorithm, really, deployed an algorithm that disrupted the market, and high-frequency traders accelerated that. So there's certainly a potential for a cascade. So what financial markets are really, really good at, so what you see in this picture is a price, which is a blue line, and a trading volume, which is a red line. And the trading volume explodes when the price plummets. There's a lot of activity in terms of trading, just as the price plummets and then recovers. So what financial markets are good at generally, and automated ones are much, much better at doing that, is generating bursts like that. E equals mc squared. Small mass, a lot of speed, squared, gives you a lot of energy. It looks like nuclear fusion. Boom. It happened before, but before markets were automated, people were trading tulips, or people were trading technology stocks, or people were trading other assets, and from time to time, you do have activity like this, but it was much, much slower before. Here is 30 minutes, and then you have sort of an enormous sort of nuclear fusion like this. You would say, yeah, maybe it happened once. Maybe there is something. Maybe it wouldn't happen again. Here's an example. On October 15, 2014, there was an event very similar to this in the US Treasuries. US Treasuries, the biggest, most liquid market, the safe interest rate, risk-free, and all of a sudden you have a pocket. Again, E equals mc squared. That's when people realize that it's periodic. It happens in markets. Many flash crashes happen in many markets, but systemically, from time to time, you do see an explosion like this. So what do we do? Well, one thing is people have come out. It's become public. Public is much more aware of what's going on. The regulators are under pressure to do something. And a book came out called Flash Boys about last year. It's very difficult to put, very popular book, sold in airports and wherever, bestseller. It's very difficult to put a human face on servers that sit in cages. So it's hard to write a book about automated markets because it's like there is no love affair. There is no bloody knife. There is no car chase. These are computers and servers, right? What do you do? This person done an incredibly good job in putting a human face on sort of the ecosystem of these markets, selected a particular individual, and as a standard way, you sort of develop tension. If something happens, an individual discovers something, then goes and talks to people and say, no, 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 you have no idea what you're talking about. Yet, it is actually what's going on. It turns out that there is a whole bunch of strategies out there that do take advantage of market participants in the way that's described up above. So this is coming from a very, very famous investor who said, how did we design this market so that someone could front run us 1/millionth of a second in front of our order? I submit an order, and somehow somebody gets to see it or anticipate it or view it and take advantage of it. So this person discovers it and figures out a strategy of how to deal with it, and then eventually becomes popular, and now this person is setting up its stock exchange in the US that's supposed to just sort of insure against behavior of this sort. So it's now in the popular domain. You Google high-frequency trading, you'll see that, again, there's fear. Technology comes with fear, especially technology that malfunctions and erases value. How do we understand it? What's inside technology? How complex is it? Let me show you what a very stylized version of an automated market looks like. Very stylized. It's a collection of computers connected to each other through very complex infrastructure, doing tasks over fiber optic cables and sometimes over microwaves now in a sort of repeated parallel process fashion. Lots of things could happen. So my colleagues and I have studied that, started looking into that. And one of the things that we decided to do is, since there are so many of these connections in there, on the floor, again, there was an environment, there was a connection, there were humans interacting, but over time, everyone was pretty much of the same speed in terms of reaction to the market. Now the speed is different. You can invest in speed. You can invest in being faster than others. And this could give you an advantage. Speed, of course, is distance traveled per unit time. So we wanted to ask ourselves a question: what is the notion of time in financial markets? How does time work? Is time calendar? What is time in the financial market? So we started looking into this and looked into something called latency. Latency is a delay between a signal and a response. So in all of these cables, information travels, packets of information travel, and they get stuck in places. And as they get stuck in places, this information and signals get stuck and unstuck in some fashion. And you would think that, if this were sort of fair markets, then these delays associated with how packets of information travel, in order to trade in automated markets, you'll need to send it a message. Think of it as an email message. It will have from, to, subject line, what you want to trail, and a bunch of information about who you are, how much money you have, and what is it that you want to do. You cannot gesticulate at it, you cannot yell at it, you need to send it a packet of data. These packets of data gets processed and they get stuck. And so we wanted to examine what they look like. Turns out that these delays in processing are random variables. They're drawn from a distribution. So a distribution is on the left-hand side. It's a random delay. When you send your message to a market, you get stuck some random time. But this randomness is not like flipping a coin. It has memory in it. And if you understand this memory, you can do better than others. So the idea was other market participants who understand the market maybe a little bit better than others. And we started looking at that, and one hunch was that maybe participants who are trading 50% of the trading volume are the ones who know best about how markets process this information. Also, in conversations with them, eventually, these high-frequency traders become known to me. And in conversations with them, I was struck by how much they know about the internal layout of infrastructure within automated platforms on which they trade. They pay very particular detail on how cables, where the servers are, how their messages come in, what is the delay associated, what particular port they come in through. They obviously invest a lot of time. So if they invest a lot of time, there should be something in it for them, potentially. So what do you do about it? Do you regulate latency? Do you go and say, look, what we're going to do now is we're going to slow everything down. Let's slow everything down. Very, very popular approach among regulators. Let's slow it down. Let's put speed bumps. Okay? Let's have everyone wait. Everyone submits orders, there's a wait, and then the orders get processed. Let's bring it back on a level playing field. I had discussions with many regulators around the world. I'll give you an example where I went and talked to the regulators in India. In India, the very vibrant stock market in which there is high-frequency trading. And banking sector in India is highly, highly regulated. So there is a lot of retail participation, ordinary people trading in the stock market. Really, it's become like a savings account for a lot of people. Very dangerous, but that's what's being done. And so the regulators are saying, look, we want to protect our retail investors. We want to put in these scramblers. What we want to do is we want to scramble how the order in which this information travels. And I ask him, do you put the scrambles before the gateways or after the gateways? And they're like, what's the gateways? Well, you need to understand how the system is laid out, because otherwise, you can't really regulate markets unless you have a deep, deep understanding of the infrastructure, the very stylized version that I presented to you. So do you regulate markets or do you regulate latency? I gave a testimony on this to the US Senate, and I said that, in my opinion, instead of regulating latency, we need to approach regulation from the point of view of data, information processing, finance, and regulation itself. You can no longer think of just strategies. We can no longer think of just technology. You also need to think about data processing. And I gave particular suggestions of how to go about it. Which brings us to how do you regulate? What are the principles of regulation? I'll tell you the principles of regulation in the United States. In the United States, regulators come out and they propose regs under something called Administrative Procedure Act. So the way it's done is as follows. So Congress passes a bill and says that something needs to be done. The people have spoken, this needs to be done. The market latency needs to be regulated in the following way. We're putting in speed bumps. They don't specify what speed bumps are, and they don't specify, typically the law doesn't specify what does it mean putting in, and they don't also specify now, like when it is put in. Right, so that comes to the regulatory agencies. So regulatory agencies, say CFTC, comes out and proposes a reg. Regulation is put out then for public comment. It's a very democratic process. And at first, when I was a part of it, I thought, it's a democracy, but really, how many people would know about, a particular rule for margin in a particular type of over-the-counter derivative? I've become convinced that this is absolutely the right way of doing things, that these regulations need to be put out for public comment, and I'll show you why. So regulations are put out for public comment. People write comments. They're over a 30, 60, 90-day period, and then the regulation is done. So my colleagues and I wanted to ask the following question. Do the regulators change their regs after the public comment period? Public submits, some regulations attract tens of thousands of comments. Do the regulators react to them? They have to read them, but do they actually change the reg? So what we've done is we've done a machine learning exercise where we've taken all the regulations passed by the US regulatory agency over the period of, I believe, 40 years. And we separated into word clusters, and we attached sentiment to these word clusters. And it turns out that some regulations run hundreds and hundreds of pages, say 800 pages. But the truth about this regulation could be described by 6 words. The rest of it is legal fortifications around it so that this law stands a legal challenge. You can really, really reduce what's called dimensionality of a reg down to what it really is through this process, through this machine learning process. We designed something called the reg algorithms that assigns a value of between 1 and -1 to regulation, depending on whether it's pro-regulatory or reducing the regulatory burden. Regulations could reduce regulatory burden as well. And then we're now dealing with numbers. So what we can do is we'll say, well, let's say the regulation is proposed, and it has a reg rank of 0.2. And then a bunch of public comments come in, and their reg rank is around 0, actually a little bit less than 0. What does it mean? That means that the public says, this is too strict. This is going in the regulatory direction too far. One possibility is, after public has spoken, the final rule is the same as the proposed rule. Basically, the regulators read public comments and said whatever. What we found consistently is that the regulatory burden of a regulation after the public has spoken comes down in the direction or goes up in the direction of where the public speaks. Why is this useful? This is useful because public could be more informed about what the regulators are doing. These things are very, very hard to understand. But if you have a number, a rating, a color attached to it, and it gives you where it comes from, you'll say, oh, I like it or I don't like it. Comments now run tens of thousands of different comments. Net neutrality comments attracted 1 million different comments. Who can read that? You need the machine technology, you need the technology now to work, to figure out how to process what the public tells you. Finally, I'll come to the technology and implementation. As I told you before, human lawyers write regs, and then a computer programmer needs to implement them. So what do? How do we change that? If markets run on code, how do we get to the point where much less is lost in translation? So we can go from analog to digital. How do we do that? We can create a circuit architecture. This is something I proposed with my colleagues for each reg. Think of a regulation. What does a regulation do? Any regulation, not in financial markets. It tells you what's allowed, what's not allowed, and what's allowed within the range. So let's think of a speed limit. It tells you can travel up to this speed, and then within the range you can still travel and it's okay. So it's very easy to actually codify that. in using a Boolean algebra, using a very specific, computer, very sort of simple computer science type of things. And then we can move, if that's done, then much less would be lost in translation. And we can move from clusters of words in a reg, which need to be interpreted by an army of lawyers and compliance professionals, and to something that my colleagues proposed as Financial Regulation 2.0, which is computer-centric. If any of you have ever written code, there's a very interesting internal transformation happens when you start writing even simple lines of code. You start putting yourself in the mind of the computer. You change your point of view. Because with computer, you interact in a very prescribed fashion, right? It doesn't respond to what you do like a human. You need to put yourself, you just sort of need to become a little bit schizophrenic. You need to put yourself, so this is you, and this is you reflected in the computer code. And then it works out very well. You tell it what to do, and it does it. So we propose to do something similar for the financial regulation, make it more computer-centric. Think of it as what the computers would do under certain circumstances if you tell them to do something. Put in a bunch of safeguards as you put into any code. An example that was given to me once is that a typical car manufactured now runs on the computer that has 50,000 approximately lines of code. A Boeing 747 flies on something like 2,500 lines of code. Why? It's less code, fewer bugs. So these safeguards, figuring out how to put them in, where they are, and make it work, is something, again, the transformation that needs to change among regulators. Am I seeing this happening? Am I seeing regulators changing how they view markets? Somewhat. I think with each one of these events, a flash crash here, a hiccup there, something collapses in the Forex market, something collapses in the bond market, regulators become more and more aware and invest more and more time and effort. They're not quite yet there when they think about, okay, let's change the paradigm. The markets are automated, but we are still pretending that, that they're not. You would say, look, Andrei, yeah, markets are automated, but humans run code. So presumably all of these questions you're saying are kind of like, it's sort of a moot point. Computers are just something that humans tell them to do. I could tell you that one of the things I discovered when I was working on the flash crash is something called gray boxes and black boxes. So these are high-frequency trading algorithms. Gray boxes are something where humans could change parameters. Black boxes are something where humans are not allowed to change parameters because humans are just too slow and too sloppy to do that. Literally, black boxes you cannot alter. They just do what they do. So this is a paradigm shift. I told you that they trade 50% of the trading volume. It is incredibly important, and humans are just sort of left to clear out the mess. If you've been investing on your own, you must be very scared right now because you're up against these machines. And typically, in the typical environments, humans are isolated from machines. There are sidewalks where humans are, and there are roads where cars are. When you come to the airport, they're typically very physical isolation. There are planes, and only some humans are allowed to operate on these planes, and the rest of the people are not allowed to be anywhere near them. In these markets, these barriers, these safeguards, are not quite yet designed in a way to protect humans, investors of different kinds, especially retail investors, but also investors who come and try to trade in size in a way that makes sense, in my opinion. And I think that needs to be done. And this research, this trajectory that I'm following is something that establishes, with my colleagues, we establish the scientific paradigm of what we think needs to be done. So these markets are safe. They could be used by you. They could be used by your kids and grandkids. Because if people get too scared about things, especially after financial markets, and lose trust, they'll find some other way of doing it. Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, please.
And you just mentioned about trust. To what extent does artificial intelligence now play a part in financial markets?
The question is, to what extent artificial intelligence is present in financial markets? There are several aspects of it that are very present. So artificial intelligence, in particular, as represented by machine learning, processes that, or algorithms that take in lots and lots of data and come up with rules of what to do. Because what you can think of that, what an artificial intelligence system is that it takes inputs, and the output is a strategy. Do this. This is the best thing you can do given the circumstances you're facing. And this strategy could be responsive, or the strategy could learn, or the strategy could even provoke something and see whether the provocation in markets, whether the markets react to this provocation. The extent of the first one is present uniformly, where lots and lots of data is routinely being processed by market participants. You just have to, otherwise you don't really understand what the state of the market is. The second one, to learn from this, there's been a lot of I've seen this both on the regulatory side and talking to market participants in how they've created various protocols so that their systems could learn better. Of course, in financial markets, one of the things is that people make money. As people make money off of this, they're being secretive about how they do it, right? So you need to learn from it by looking at the data and recovering from the data. This third type of artificial intelligence, where markets are pinged or provoked, and their reaction is then interpreted, and the changes in the ecosystem are then used for trading. In some jurisdictions, parts of it have become illegal, but how you actually do it is really quite important. So in order for something to be illegal, you need to show intent. Someone intended to do something. In an automated environment, in an artificial intelligence environment, intent will be written into code, right? How do you see that? The regulators in many jurisdictions ask to actually see the code if they need to. At the same time, I have my doubts that they would be able to understand it. And also the code could be altered before they see it. So it is present. It is visible, because you hear complaints all the time. And this is also an environment in which is incredibly rich in data, and in which you can pay directly for your innovation. Because if it's good, it prints you money, right? So various people have been attracted. You can see that financial firms attract people with advanced degrees in mechanical engineer and computer science and in statistical analysis. So things are being done. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Does the currency market work the same way? So with computers, because it's a market which is less influenced by speculation.
The currency market, so foreign exchange market, is probably one of the most speculative markets because the currency unlike a stock or a bond, it's a price that accumulates lots and lots of information, geopolitical, trade, perceptions, news. It's, in terms of its organization, it's organized very differently. It's organized in more of a bilateral fashion in which market participants come to a trading platform. But yes, there is a lot of, automated trading is heavily present in Forex market. There's been a recent hiccup in the Swiss franc exchange rate associated with the automated trading strategies.
Given what you said about speed bumps and a way to regulate the market, do you think IEX is going to get its SEC approval?
That question to me is sort of IEX, so the person who is profiled in Flash Boys, the human face battling high frequency trading and latency issues, is the person who, as I said, went and started the stock exchange and now is in approval process with the US regulator of markets, US Securities and Exchange Commission, for that stock exchange. And so it's been just sort of an arduous approval process. I would answer the question, perhaps, if you allow me, in the following way. I think it should be allowed to be present, because if investors feel, if market participants feel that this is a service that they want, they should have the service. And then let them compete for clients. If they deliver on their promise within the regulatory guidelines, I think it should be there. Why not? I think it would be a great idea.
In the public phase where you comment on the regulation, how do you ensure that all the different parties get the same fair crack?
Currently, the regulators are obligated to read all comments. And I'm more familiar with the US system. I'm familiar with the European system and the UK system as well. So I'm primarily speaking about the transatlantic phenomenon, less familiar with the Asians. And they need to explain why they don't take particular comments into account. And I read many of these comments, and some of these comments read, the federal government should be abolished, period. So, you don't need to respond to this comment. You can just say, so many comments were received, and you receive wacky comments all the time. It's a public process, right? And you can say so many comments were received. They basically had very little to do with the subject at hand. They were read, but they don't really contribute anything constructive. Some comments are prepared by teams of lawyers and market participants that run for, dozens of pages that have quantitative analysis and models in them. You need to respond to those differently. Now, one of the things that I think would help with this way that we're suggesting is having the machine text processing of these comments and generating sort of scores for them and seeing whether these scores were included in the final reg would add this additional transparency. I agree with you that this transparency in terms of what have the regulators done and who have they listened to and which comments they primarily have taken into account needs to be improved. And the suggestion that my colleagues and I have is technological improvement. If, let's say, you can have on your iPhone, you can look at the color of different regulations that are in there, then you can participate in it more directly rather than reading 600 pages. Well, thank you very much.